Sometimes the most painful lies are not the ones told to us by others, but the ones we repeat quietly to ourselves. You tell yourself they didn't mean it. You say they're just busy. You convince your heart, maybe I'm expecting too much. But deep down, you already know. Allah did not give you intuition to ignore it. He gave it to protect you. Today, we are not talking about hatred, revenge, or cutting people off without wisdom. We are talking about awareness, because Islam does not teach us to be naive. It teaches us to be kind with clarity. If someone is only using you, they will reveal themselves, not once, not loudly, but consistently. And if you are honest with yourself, the signs were always there. Ask yourself this with sincerity, not defensiveness, not excuses, not fear of being wrong. When do they reach out to you? Look at the pattern, not the isolated moment. Anyone can send a kind message once. Anyone can check in occasionally. Patterns reveal intention. Patterns don't lie. Do they reach out when you are quiet and withdrawn, when your energy is low, when your heart is heavy? Or do they suddenly remember you when a problem appears in their life, when something is missing, when they need a solution they don't want to work for themselves? You already know the answer. You just don't like what it implies. There is a difference between someone who includes you in their life and someone who contacts you only when their life requires something from you. One sees you as a person, the other sees you as a function. Notice how the conversation begins. It rarely starts with genuine concern. It starts with small talk that quickly moves toward a request. Sometimes the request is obvious, sometimes it's disguised. Advice, emotional reassurance, money, time, access, validation, a favor wrapped in friendliness. And you give it because you are kind, because you don't want to be difficult, because you believe helping people is rewarded by Allah, and it is. But here is where honesty matters. Helping does not mean allowing yourself to be used repeatedly without awareness. Once their need is fulfilled, something subtle but consistent happens. The warmth fades, the effort disappears, replies become slower, conversations shorten, plans dissolve. You don't hear from them again until the next need appears. This is not coincidence, this is rhythm. Islam teaches us balance in all relationships. A believer does not consume without contributing. The Prophet, peace be upon him, showed us through his character that relationships are built on mutual care, not one-sided extraction. When someone consistently benefits from your presence but shows little interest in your well-being, that is not brotherhood, that is not sisterhood, that is usage. Let's be very clear here, because many people confuse kindness with self-erasure. Being generous does not mean being blind. Being patient does not mean being passive. Being forgiving does not mean being exploitable. Allah never asked you to ignore reality to prove your goodness. Think about how you feel after these interactions, not during them, but after. During the conversation, you may feel needed, useful, relevant, but afterward, do you feel fulfilled or drained? Do you feel connected or empty? Do you feel appreciated or quietly depleted? Your emotional state is information. Stop dismissing it. A person who truly cares about you will remember you beyond their needs. They will ask about your life without steering the conversation back to themselves. They will notice when you disappear, not just when they require something. They may not be perfect, they may not always show up, but there will be effort without agenda. The one who uses you, however, treats your availability like a switch, on when needed, off when satisfied. And over time, if you are not careful, you start shaping yourself around their demands. You stay reachable, you stay agreeable, you stay helpful. You silence your own exhaustion because you don't want to lose the connection. But ask yourself this question honestly. What connection are you afraid of losing? A relationship where you are only remembered when you are useful is not intimacy. It is dependency disguised as closeness. Some people don't want you, they want what you provide. And the moment you stop providing, they disappear. Not because you changed, but because their access did. This is where many people struggle spiritually. They say, but Islam teaches us to help people. Yes, it does. But Islam also teaches us justice even with ourselves. The Prophet, peace be upon him, warned against oppression. And oppression does not only come from enemies. Sometimes it comes quietly from those who benefit while you bleed silently. Helping someone occasionally is generosity. Being expected to help endlessly without care for your limits is exploitation. You are not sinful for noticing this. You are not selfish for acknowledging it. Awareness is not cruelty. It is clarity, and clarity is mercy. You are not a bank account. You are not an emotional dumping ground. You are not a solution machine. You are a human being with a heart, limits, and dignity. If someone remembers you only when they need you, Allah may be showing you something important, not to make you bitter, but to make you wiser. You don't need to confront them aggressively. You don't need to announce your realization. You don't need to cut people off dramatically. Sometimes the most powerful response is quiet adjustment. Reduce access. Slow your availability. Observe what remains when you stop overgiving. If the relationship collapses when you stop pouring, then it was never built on mutual care to begin with. And that realization, painful as it may be, is not a loss, it is protection. Because the believer does not cling to relationships that drain the soul. The believer trusts that Allah replaces what is unhealthy with what is sincere. Stop measuring your worth by how useful you are to others. Your value does not come from being needed. It comes from being a servant of Allah who honors the trust of their own heart. This lesson is uncomfortable because it removes all doubt. Up until now, you may have been unsure. You may have said, maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe this is just how they are. But this sign leaves very little room for denial. Watch what happens the moment you say no. Not rudely, not harshly, not disrespectfully. Just a calm, reasonable no. You explain that you're tired, that you're busy, that you can't help this time, that you need space, that you need to protect your own time, energy, or resources. And suddenly, the atmosphere changes. Their tone shifts. Their warmth cools. Their patience disappears. You feel it immediately. The conversation becomes short. The kindness becomes conditional. Sometimes it turns into guilt, sometimes into silence, sometimes into subtle punishment. This reaction is not about your no, it is about their entitlement. A person who values you respects your boundaries even when they are disappointed. A person who uses you sees your boundaries as betrayal. Islam does not teach us to say yes to everything. Even the Prophet, peace be upon him, said no. Even he had limits. Even he withdrew when needed. Boundaries are not a modern invention. They are a sign of wisdom. But the one who benefits from your constant yes feels threatened when you finally choose yourself. Notice how quickly appreciation turns into accusation. You've changed. You're being selfish. You're not the same anymore. These words are not observations. They are pressure tactics. They are designed to push you back into the role that made them comfortable. And here is where many good-hearted people fall into a trap. You start doubting yourself. You ask, am I being unfair? Am I lacking patience? Am I failing as a good Muslim? No. What you are experiencing is resistance. When you stop overgiving, those who were overtaking feel exposed. Think carefully. If your kindness was genuine before, why does it suddenly become a flaw when you say no? If your character was good yesterday, why is it questionable today? The truth is simple. Your value to them was never about who you are. It was about what you provide. As long as you are useful, you are welcomed. The moment you are unavailable, you become inconvenient. Islam teaches us that intentions matter. If someone's treatment of you changes based on your usefulness, their intention was never sincere connection, it was benefit, and this is where clarity must replace guilt. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself endlessly. You are allowed to rest without apologizing. You are allowed to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. Saying no is not arrogance, it is honesty. And honesty often reveals people's true motives. Watch how they respond after your no. Do they understand and respect it, or do they withdraw affection until you feel uncomfortable enough to give in again? Some people don't argue, they punish quietly, they disappear, they become cold, they make you feel like you've done something wrong without ever saying it directly. This is emotional control. And control has no place in healthy relationships. A believer does not manipulate through guilt. A believer does not make kindness conditional. A believer does not weaponize silence to regain access. If someone only treats you well when you comply, someone else's comfort. And here is the most important part. When your value drops in their eyes after you say no, that does not mean your value actually dropped. It means their vision was always distorted. They didn't see you as a person. They saw you as access. So let them react. Let them reveal themselves. Let them feel uncomfortable. Your peace is not negotiable. Because the moment you realize that respect should not depend on compliance, you stop begging for acceptance and start walking with dignity. And that shift, though it may cost you some people, will save your soul. This lesson is quieter than the others, but it cuts deeper because it reveals something uncomfortable. Not everyone who stays close to you wants to see you rise. At the beginning, they were comfortable with you when you were uncertain, when you were struggling, when you leaned on them, when your confidence was low and your position was familiar. But as you begin to grow, something changes. You become more self-aware. You gain confidence. You improve your character, your discipline, your direction. Allah opens doors for you that were once closed. And instead of joy, you sense tension. Instead of encouragement, you feel distance. Instead of celebration, you get silence. Instead of I'm happy for you, you receive indifference, comparison, or subtle criticism. This is not accidental. A person who truly cares about you finds happiness in your growth, even if it reminds them of their own stagnation. A person who uses you, however, benefits from you staying where you were. Your growth threatens their advantage. When you were unsure, they could guide you. When you were dependent, they could influence you. When you doubted yourself, they could position themselves above you. But when you start standing taller, thinking clearer, setting boundaries, and relying more on Allah than on them, their role weakens. And that makes them uncomfortable. So they begin to minimize your progress. They don't acknowledge your achievements. They change the subject when you share good news. They make jokes that shrink your confidence. They remind you of your past mistakes as if to pull you backward. Not openly, not aggressively, subtly. This subtlety is what makes it confusing. You tell yourself, maybe they're just not expressive. You say, maybe they didn't mean it that way. You excuse what your heart already understands. But ask yourself honestly, would you react this way if the roles were reversed? When someone you care about improves, do you feel threatened or proud? Do you compete or celebrate? Do you feel smaller or inspired? Your answer matters. Islam teaches us that envy is a disease of the heart. It doesn't always show itself as hatred. Sometimes it shows itself as silence where support should be. A person who uses you does not want you weak, but they also do not want you strong. They want you capable enough to help them, but limited enough to stay beneath them. This is a dangerous place to be. Because over time you start dimming yourself without realizing it. You stop sharing good news. You downplay your success. You hesitate before stepping into your potential. Not because Allah closed the door, but because someone close to you makes you feel uncomfortable walking through it. That is not humility. That is conditioning. True humility is lowering yourself before Allah, not shrinking yourself to preserve someone else's comfort. Pay attention to how they react when Allah blesses you. Do they make space for your joy? Do they support your growth even when it doesn't benefit them? Do they pray for your success sincerely? Or do they become distant, passive, or quietly dismissive? Some people don't want you to fail, but they also don't want you to surpass the version of you that served them best. And this is where clarity is required. You are not obligated to stay small to keep others comfortable. You are not required to apologize for the blessings Allah gives you. You are not wrong for outgrowing spaces that once felt familiar. Growth is not betrayal. When Allah elevates you, He is not asking you to look back for permission. He is asking you to move forward with gratitude and responsibility. If someone cannot celebrate your growth, it does not make them evil. But it does mean you must be careful with access. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your becoming. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to announce your awareness. You don't need to cut them off harshly. You simply need to stop shrinking. Continue growing quietly. Let Allah shape you. Let your character strengthen. Let your reliance shift fully to Him. Those who are sincere will adjust. Those who were benefiting will struggle. And those reactions will tell you everything you need to know. Because a person who truly values you wants you to rise, even if it means they must rise too. Anyone who prefers you smaller than you are is not invested in your well-being. They are invested in their comfort. And Islam does not ask you to sacrifice your growth for someone else's insecurity. Your growth is a trust from Allah. Honor it. This lesson exposes imbalance so clearly that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Ask yourself a simple but revealing question. Who is always adjusting? Who waits longer? Who explains more? Who compromises first? Who swallows discomfort to keep things smooth? If the answer is always you, then the relationship is not mutual. It is managed. In a healthy relationship, effort moves in both directions. Not perfectly, not equally at every moment, but fairly over time. There is give and take. There is consideration. There is space for both people's needs to exist. But when someone is using you, the relationship quietly reorganizes itself around their convenience. Plans happen when they are free. Conversations happen when they are in the mood. Decisions lean toward what suits them. Your time becomes flexible. Their time becomes sacred. And slowly, without a single argument, you are trained to adapt. You wait for replies. You rearrange your schedule. You lower your expectations. Not because you are weak, but because you are trying to preserve peace. But peace that requires one person to constantly bend is not peace. It is pressure disguised as harmony. Islam teaches us fairness, not imbalance. Even in acts of worship, there is moderation. The Prophet, peace be upon him, corrected those who went to extremes, reminding them that the body has rights, the family has rights, and the soul has rights. So how could Islam approve of a relationship where only one person's needs are acknowledged? Notice how your needs are treated. When they are busy, you are expected to understand. When you are busy, you are expected to adjust. When they are tired, the conversation pauses. When you are tired, the conversation continues. When they need space, it is respected. When you need space, it is questioned. This is not misunderstanding. This is hierarchy. And the painful part is that this hierarchy often forms without intention. It forms because you are accommodating, patient, forgiving, and considerate. Qualities that should be honored end up being exploited. Over time, you stop expressing what you need. You don't want to seem demanding. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to risk conflict. So you become agreeable. And the more agreeable you become, the more the relationship shifts to their terms. This is how people lose themselves quietly. A person who truly values you will notice when the balance tilts. They will ask, are you okay with this? They will check in. They will adjust when they see you adjusting too much. The one who uses you benefits from imbalance. Why would they question a system that serves them? So they normalize it. They call it how things are. They call it not a big deal. They call it you're overthinking. But you are not overthinking. You are finally thinking honestly. Islam does not teach blind endurance. It teaches justice. And injustice does not require cruelty. It can exist quietly in repeated disregard. Pay attention to how decisions are made. Who decides when conversations end? Who decides when effort resumes? Who decides what matters? If the answer consistently excludes you, then your presence is conditional. And conditional presence is not love. It is convenience. Another sign of a relationship built on their terms is how conflict is handled. When you raise an issue, is it met with listening or defensiveness, with accountability or dismissal? Often, the person who controls the terms also controls the narrative. Your concerns are minimized. Your feelings are reframed as overreactions. The focus shifts away from the issue and onto your tone, your timing, or your sensitivity. This keeps you stuck because now, instead of addressing imbalance, you are busy proving that your feelings are valid. But your feelings do not require permission to exist. Islam does not ask you to remain silent in the face of unfairness. It asks you to speak with wisdom and act with dignity. And sometimes, dignity looks like stepping back. Not dramatically, not angrily, quietly. You stop over-accommodating. You stop rushing to respond. You stop rearranging your life around someone who never rearranges theirs for you. And then you observe. If the relationship collapses the moment you stop bending, then it was never built to support you standing upright. That realization can hurt, because it forces you to confront the truth that what you called connection was often tolerance, patience, and self-sacrifice on your side alone. But pain is not always punishment. Sometimes it is correction. Allah does not remove peace without reason. When a relationship consistently leaves you feeling small, unheard, or secondary, it may be Allah protecting your dignity. You are not required to stay where your needs are invisible. You are not obligated to accept imbalance as loyalty. And you are not failing Islam by choosing self-respect. The believer is humble but not humiliated, patient but not passive, kind but not disposable. If a relationship only works on their terms, it is not a relationship to grow in. It is a space you outgrow. And when you finally stop adjusting to what hurts you, you make room for what honors you. That is not selfishness. That is wisdom. This lesson is one of the clearest, yet it is also the one people resist accepting the most. That is because it forces you to confront a painful reality. Some people are only present when your strength benefits them, not when your vulnerability requires effort. Look back carefully, without emotion, without nostalgia, without excuses. Look at the moments when your life became heavy, when you were overwhelmed, when you were anxious, grieving, exhausted, confused, or quietly breaking inside. These are the moments that reveal truth. Where were they then? When your energy dropped, did they lean in or step away? When you could no longer carry conversations, provide solutions, or show up as your best self, did they become patient or distant? When you needed understanding instead of usefulness, did they stay or vanish? A person who values you does not draw compassion when effort was required. That is the standard Islam sets, not the minimum convenience people offer today. When someone disappears during your hardship, they are communicating something clearly. Even if they never say it out loud, they are saying that your worth to them was tied to what you provided, not who you are. And this realization hurts because it exposes an imbalance you hoped was not there. Over time, this pattern affects you deeply. You stop reaching out when you are struggling. You silence your pain. You handle everything alone because experience has taught you that vulnerability will be met with absence. This is dangerous, not because independence is bad, but because isolation born from disappointment erodes the heart. Allah did not create us to suffer silently while pretending we are fine for the comfort of others. Pay attention to how they react when you need support rather than offering it. Do they listen without rushing you? Do they check in later? Do they remember what you shared and follow up? Or do they change the subject, disappear, or subtly make your pain feel like an inconvenience? Some people only want the version of you that is useful, positive, strong, and emotionally available. The moment you require support, instead of providing it, they retreat. That is not a relationship. That is dependency in one direction. This does not mean they are evil people. It does not mean you must hate them. But it does mean you must stop expecting from them what they have already shown they cannot give. Expectation without evidence is self-harm. Islam does not teach us to repeatedly place our hearts in the same wound and call it patience. Patience is enduring what you cannot change while acting wisely with what you can. You cannot force someone to care when there is nothing in it for them, but you can choose how much access they have to you. Sometimes the most merciful thing Allah does is allow people to disappear when you are struggling, so you can see who was truly present and who was only passing through. This clarity, though painful, is protection. It teaches you to stop over-investing in people who retreat at the first sign of difficulty. It teaches you to reserve your vulnerability for those who have earned it. It teaches you to rely more deeply on Allah, who never withdraws His care when you are weak. Human beings may leave when you are empty. Allah draws closer. And that is why this lesson matters. Because once you see who disappears when life gets hard, you stop chasing them for comfort they cannot provide. You stop asking the wrong people for support. You stop explaining your pain to those who are absent. You stop bleeding where there is no care. And instead, you turn toward what is stable, sincere, and safe. That shift is not bitterness, it is maturity. Because the believer learns not only who to love, but who to trust. And trust is proven when there is nothing to gain. This lesson requires honesty with yourself, not logic, not explanations, not spiritual justifications. It asks you to listen to something many people are taught to ignore: how your heart feels after repeated interaction. Not during the conversation, not while you are being useful, after you hang up, after you leave, after the message exchange ends, when you are alone with yourself again. Do you feel calm, settled, and at ease? Or do you feel heavy, restless, and strangely exhausted? This distinction matters more than most people realize. Allah created the heart with perception. It senses imbalance before the mind is willing to admit it. When something repeatedly drains you, that is not weakness. That is awareness trying to surface. A relationship that is healthy does not require constant emotional labor from one side. It does not leave you feeling responsible for another person's stability, mood, or outcomes. It may involve effort, but it does not consume your inner peace. When someone is using you, the interaction revolves around their needs, their emotions, their problems, their expectations. You listen more than you speak. You carry more than you share. You absorb their stress, their confusion, their frustration, and you leave carrying what was never yours to begin with. Over time, this creates a subtle but serious pattern. You begin interactions already tired. You brace yourself before speaking to them. You prepare mentally. You anticipate requests. You rehearse responses. This is not connection. This is emotional management. And emotional management, when it is one-sided, is draining by nature. Islam does not teach us to ignore the state of our hearts. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us to seek tranquility, not constant emotional turbulence. He spoke of hearts finding rest, not depletion. Ask yourself honestly, does interacting with this person bring you closer to balance or push you further into exhaustion? Many people dismiss this question because they confuse peace with passivity. They think feeling drained means they are not patient enough or not spiritually strong enough. That is not true. There is a difference between patience and erosion. Patience sustains, erosion wears you down. When a relationship consistently leaves you depleted, it is often because you are giving without receiving, listening without being heard, supporting without being supported. And the most dangerous part is that this can happen slowly. You don't notice it at first. You tell yourself you are just tired. You assume life is busy. You blame work, stress, or responsibilities. But when you look closely, you realize the exhaustion spikes after specific interactions. That is not coincidence. Your body and heart recognize imbalance long before your mind accepts it. Notice how you behave around them. Do you feel you must perform? Do you filter yourself excessively? Do you feel responsible for keeping the interaction positive, smooth, or productive? When you feel responsible for someone else's emotional state, peace disappears. A person who values you does not leave you feeling like you must earn calmness. They do not make you feel like love is a task. Their presence does not feel like work. This does not mean they are perfect or that interactions are always easy. It means there is mutual effort. There is emotional exchange, not emotional extraction. When someone uses you, however, they offload their burdens onto you and walk away lighter while you remain carrying the weight. This is why you feel drained. And here is where many sincere people struggle spiritually. They think, maybe this is my test. They think, maybe Allah wants me to endure this. But Allah does not test you by repeatedly placing you in spaces that break your spirit while teaching you nothing new. Tests are meant to refine, not hollow you out. If something consistently drains your peace without growth, insight, or balance, it is not a test to endure. It is a sign to adjust. Islam does not ask you to destroy your emotional well-being to prove your faith. It asks you to act with wisdom, justice, and self-awareness. Peace is not a luxury, it is a sign of alignment. When you repeatedly ignore your lack of peace to maintain access for someone else, you are prioritizing their comfort over your well-being, and that is not righteousness. Pay attention to the cost of staying connected. If every interaction leaves you exhausted, questioning yourself, or emotionally depleted, then something is wrong with the structure of that relationship. You do not need to diagnose the other person. You do not need to label them. You only need to acknowledge the effect. Effects matter more than intentions. You can care about someone and still limit their access. You can be kind and still protect your energy. You can be patient without being perpetually drained. Sometimes the most faithful choice is to step back from what disturbs your peace and trust that Allah will replace imbalance with better alignment. Because Allah does not want your heart constantly heavy. He wants it alive, aware, and at rest in what is good. And when you finally listen to what your heart has been telling you all along, you stop forcing yourself into spaces that take more than they give. That is not selfishness. That is self-respect guided by wisdom. And it is long overdue. This is the final lesson, and it is the one that brings everything together. Because by the time you reach this point, the signs are no longer hidden. They are simply uncomfortable to accept. Ask yourself this carefully. How often do you explain their behavior to yourself or to others? You find yourself filling in gaps they leave behind. You soften their words. You excuse their absence. You reframe their disrespect so it sounds less painful than it actually is. You say they are stressed. You say they didn't mean it. You say this is just how they are. And every time you do this, you are not protecting them. You are protecting your hope. Hope that they care more than they show. Hope that your effort will eventually be returned. Hope that the relationship will become what you imagined it to be. But reality does not need defense. Truth stands without explanation. When something is healthy, you don't have to convince yourself of it. You don't have to justify it repeatedly. You don't have to rewrite events in your mind so they hurt less. You simply experience it and feel at peace. The need to constantly justify is a sign of inner conflict. Part of you recognizes the imbalance. Another part of you resists the conclusion. And to reduce that tension, you create explanations. This is not dishonesty. It is self-protection. But over time, it becomes self-betrayal. Islam teaches us to be truthful, first with ourselves. The heart cannot remain healthy when it is repeatedly forced to deny what it perceives clearly. Notice how you react when someone else points out the issue. You defend them quickly. You downplay your own feelings. You feel uncomfortable when the truth is spoken out loud. This discomfort is not because the observation is wrong. It is because it threatens the narrative you have been holding on to. A person who values you does not require constant translation. Their actions align with their words. Their presence does not confuse you. Their behavior does not force you to become their spokesperson. But when someone is using you, clarity disappears. You are left interpreting silence, decoding tone, and explaining absence. You become emotionally overworked, trying to maintain a sense of meaning. And slowly, you start normalizing what should never be normal. You normalize being overlooked. You normalize feeling secondary. You normalize emotional inconsistency. Until one day, you cannot remember what it feels like to be treated with ease. This is where awareness must interrupt the pattern. If you are always explaining why someone does not show up for you, then they are not showing up for you. If you are constantly defending their behavior, then something in that behavior needs defending. If you must work to believe you are valued, then you are not being valued. Islam does not require you to stay confused to prove loyalty. It does not ask you to tolerate emotional ambiguity in the name of patience. Patience does not